So good morning, good afternoon and good evening to everybody, and welcome to today's session, the Water Innovation Showcase, Valuing Water, which forms part of ICLEI Africa's Changing Cities webinar series and Rise Africa. My name is Taryn from ICLEI Africa, and I will be hosting this session for you today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so that you know how to participate in today's event. The session will be recorded, so it will be available post this webinar. And we'd like to invite you to type and send your questions in the Q&A and the comment boxes. Remember to send them to all panelists and participants so that we can see them and ensure that the panelists have the opportunity to respond. We will then collect these and address them during the question and answer session. We'd also like to invite you to please start by introducing yourself in the chat, your organization, and reflecting on what does water mean to you. As I mentioned, this webinar is part of the Rise Africa series, which brings together thinkers, doers, and enablers to promote art, creative expression, and other ways of knowing to inspire action for sustainable cities. The Rise Africa Action Festival 2021 aims to celebrate our cities through creative sessions, to deeper ongoing conversations, and to showcase and promote ongoing activities, which are already transforming our African cities. The theme for this year is the next urban champions, and we invite you to participate in this dialogue. We thank you to all of our speakers for joining us today, and to Ms. Kopi Brand from ICLEI Africa and Dr. Mandlan Sibi from the Water Research Commission for hosting this webinar. I would like to open this session by inviting Ms. Kopi Brand, Regional Director for ICLEI Africa, to share some words of welcome and opening remarks. Ms. Brand, I give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Taryn. And I just want to check you can hear me all right? Good. So today it's a real honor to be here with everybody joining us on this webinar, which will also be broadcast and available through YouTube later on. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good afternoon. Welcome to the Changing Cities webinar series brought to you by ICLEI Africa. Today's session, the Water Innovation Showcase, Valuing Water, is hosted by ICLEI Africa in partnership with our colleagues at the Water Research Commission. Water touches everyone and everything in our cities. To build resilience, valuing water is pivotal to inspire action in African cities. As we celebrated World Water Day yesterday, under the theme of valuing water, we recognize that this is a crucial conversation for our cities to be had and to act on. The UN Assembly declared 2018 to 2028 as the International Decade for Action on Water under the theme Water for Sustainable Development. This aims, of course, to improve cooperation, partnership, and capacity development in response to the ambitious 2030 agenda. And yet, for water, we are still far, far behind. The UN Summary Progress Update on 2021 for SDG 6 noted that 2.2 billion people, that's roughly 29% of the world's population, still lack safely managed drinking water services. And 4.2 billion people lacked safely managed sanitation. And with that comes dignity and other social aspects related to that. Critically, in light of the global pandemic, the report noted that 40% of the world's population still lacks basic hand washing facilities with soap and water in the home. It is critical, therefore, that we address these shortfalls as a matter of urgency. With a focus on valuing water, we need to move the conversation beyond pricing to include the environmental, social, and cultural value we place on water. We know that by 2050, we will have to build once more the same urban capacity in terms of infrastructure as we have built over the last 4,000 years. This urban capacity will need to be built in new ways, if we are to respond to the global challenges that manifest locally. And we will need new technologies and mechanisms for service delivery in order to provide the operation and maintenance of current urban infrastructure, which is often already in disrepair, and to extend the new water and sanitation infrastructure needed to serve our growing urban communities. We need improved coordination mechanisms urgently, unusual partnerships urgently, with multi-stakeholder engagement to re-evaluate water pricing and tariffs, to close the gap between cost of water and price of water, to bring together diverse stakeholders to actively engage in the dialogue, taking hands also for action, and harnessing multi-level governance and multi-stakeholder, whole of society, whole of government approaches, to integrate policy and planning for water into climate, disaster risk, and also when it comes to what we were told by the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, at the end of 2020, our urgent need to restore humanity's relationship with the planet, which he described as a broken relationship. We need behavior change to look at how we value water and how our collective actions can positively influence management of the precious resource that we call water, and we often take for granted. If we consider the example of the drought in Cape Town, where we live, where I live, where I'm talking from today, and the real challenge of day zero the city faced, we saw innovation as a central approach to the crisis, with a massive behavioral change campaign, which led to one of the fastest reductions in water consumption ever witnessed on this planet. Water usage was cut by 50% in 3 years. It took Melbourne, which is also a sterling example for such behavioral change, a full 12 years to do the same. So it is possible. We can do it. We need to build collaboration with other sectors, adopting nature-based solutions, increasing our focus on green and blue infrastructure. And at the same time, we can improve engagement with key initiatives, global initiatives already on the go, such as Cities with Nature, which aims to mainstream planning for nature and mainstreaming nature into the urban environment. And water, as we know, is nature. We invite you to engage with our presenters and join the conversation today. What does water mean to you, for you, to you? To redirect how we value water towards collective action in achieving the Sustainable Development Goal 6, SDG 6. I thank you. And I would now like to invite our co-host here today, Dr. Mandla Msibi, Group Executive Innovation and Impact from our colleagues and our organization that we work so closely with, the Water Research Commission, to take the floor. Dr. Msibi, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, colleagues. As I have been introduced, my name is Mandla Msibi from the Water Research Commission. And I just want to say upfront, it truly is a great honor to be working with ICLEI, especially in co-hosting this event. And yesterday, I actually saw something very critical that makes the timing of this webinar to have been, I don't know about the planners, but it just comes at a very important time. The UN was launching a publication which is focusing on the value of water. I have not gone through it yet, but I just saw the highlights. And I believe today some of the issues that are discussed therein will be discussed, and I can't wait to hear what you colleagues will be saying about these important matters. It truly is an impressive time. I was reminded as I was going through the program of a time when I was doing my undergraduate degree, the university, the campus where I was staying ran out of water for 2 weeks. And after 1 week, the stench was all over the campus. And one student wrote a very big poster, put it on one of the pillars saying, the value of water is visible when there is no water. In fact, the actual wording, I wrote it down here, the value of water is realized in its absence. And it made me ask myself this question, therefore, what is the value of water? We as the Water Research Commission have done a lot of work around trying to put a value, around valuing water, but our focus was more on the economic aspects, trying to figure out how to design our tariff models. How do we charge for water? That's why we did those studies. And when I look at what the discussion is about today, it just makes us reflect. The value of water is not only about the cost and the price. It's much more than that. It's much more than that. There's a saying that water is life. There's a saying that says, without water, nothing else matters. If water is life, what is the value of life? What is the value of water? If without water, nothing else, absolutely nothing else matters, it means the total value of everything else is therefore less than the value of water. Now, this leaves you, colleagues, with more questions than answers. And again, that was really the purpose of my opening remarks here, because I want to listen with a heart, with a mind that says, maybe I'm going to get some answers to these questions. What is the value of water? And as the discussions are going on, my colleague has touched on the issues of wastefulness. In that during the day zero, people in a short space of time began to get their act together, and they were able to use water sparingly according to the way we are supposed to be using water. I believe that not understanding the value of water is the cause behind our wasteful use of water. If we can get this right, we'll find ourselves being very responsible users of water in every sector of our population. With that said, colleagues, I truly wish you a very vibrant discussion. And these answers that we need, I do believe they will be brought onto the table. Some of the issues will be dealt with. And I believe we'll leave this webinar much more informed than at this particular time when we are asking questions. With that said, colleagues, I truly wish you a wonderful discussion, a very fruitful one indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manman-Sibi and Mrs. Brand, for sharing your opening remarks on the importance of valuing water, which is ever more critical in our growing urban centres. We now have 2 moderated sessions. Each session will have 3 speakers and will be followed by a question and answer session. Sorry, just getting... Okay, there you go, there's the video. Yes, we'll be followed by a question and answer session. These sessions aim to showcase innovation and lessons learned from projects and innovations that focus on the value of water, covering the themes of governance, technology, economics, and capacity development. Our moderator for the first half of the session is Tiana Choke from the Water Research Commission, followed by Lauren Aranza from ICLE Africa for the second session. As our speakers present, we would invite you to add your questions in the question and answer session so that we can collate them for the speakers. We also invite you throughout the session to add your thoughts as to what water means to you and how you value water. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our first moderator, Mr. Tiani Choke of the Water Research Commission. Tiani, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this special session. And also thanking Kobe and Dr. Msibi for your opening remarks. Those are wonderful words indeed. And now we are going to actually run off to the next session where we're looking how do we actually value water in this continent, in this country, in the world. In South Africa, the Bill of Rights provides for the access of quality water to all citizens. Now, maybe the question there should be, is the water free? So quite a maybe discussion that we must have there. And also, how do we actually value water outside of the finance, outside of accounting? So hopefully the next three speakers will give us the opportunity to actually examine that and give us their thoughts. So first on my lineup will be Dewey Stafford, who is coming from TNC, which is the technology, which is the Nature Conservancy. Louis joined the Nature Conservancy in 2017. She has over 24 years experience in invasive species management. And she also plays a very big role in the development and partnership and provision of strategic leadership and support for TNC. So Louis, if you don't mind, please take us through your presentation. We look forward to hearing what you have to say and what your thinking is in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiani, and good day to everybody. I can only build on Kobe and Dr. Musibi's introduction. So so it's about valuing water. How do we value water? Now, before we start with the session, I'd like to do an exercise, and the exercise consists of two parts. The first part is, please use the chat and type there what you pay every month in your water bill per liter for water. So how much does water cost you every month per liter? And I hope we can start seeing the answers come through on the chat. And if you don't exactly have the number, feel free to add an estimate. The second part of the question is, if the municipality or the utility announce an increase in the water tariffs, how will you respond? Will you respond positively and say, yes, we think it's a good idea, or say no, they can't, the water is too expensive? If you on the second part of where you will say the water is, it's not the right thing to increase the price of water, then why? And if you would be a person who would say, we should increase the price of water, and you know if somebody would be against it, think about how that person will argue it. So are we paying, the question is, are we paying enough for water? So let's use the example of drinking water, a liter of bottled water versus a liter of tap water. So if we think about, we pay on average 10 Rand a liter, which is 66 cents a liter per liter for bottled water, and we pay 4 cents a liter or 2 cents per liter of water for tap water. If we look at the bottled water, we're actually not paying for a liter of water. We're paying for 29 liters of water, because it takes 26 liters to make 1 liter plastic bottle, and it takes 3 liters of water to get that 1 liter of water in the bottle. So actually we pay R2.90 a liter of water, which is about, what's the dollar amount? It's about $2. No, it's much less, but I think you have the picture. So it's about 4 cents. So it's much cheaper to what we're doing when we look at the bottled water. We look at the value chain from where the water comes into the bottle to where it's on the shelves and we can buy it. So if we want to value water, we have to look at it through the lens of the user. Who benefits? Who benefits from the water being there, and who are at most risk when there is no water? And we look at forestry and agriculture to produce food, and we look at cities where the municipalities are the water services providers and the residents pay a water tariff. And there was mention about Cape Town almost running out of water, and this is when the Greater Cape Town Water Fund was established in 2018, and we looked at what are the different options for the city of Cape Town to augment water supply to avoid running out of water. And municipalities have certain options, such as in the case of the city, they looked at water desalination, water reuse, aquifer use of water. And then if we look at a municipality would like to avoid raising the tariffs because there are people who may not be able to afford it. And there's different arguments for not increasing the price of water. So how do they meet demand? If they look at the various options and look at the cheapest or the most cost-effective option, which is nature-based solutions, then they can make an informed decision. So if you can compare the restoration of watersheds versus desalination, just that cost is about the return on investment by investing in nature is 351% over desalination. So this helps a city or a utility to make an informed decision. So how do we bend the curve towards water security? And Kobe's mentioned this. It's not about the price or the value of water, it's having a secure water future. So I suggest 4 things of what we should consider when we want to bend the curve. The first one is to look at the water ecosystem. And by that, I mean, look at the culture of water, what water does for the different users, how do we depend on water, from energy to production of food to transport, and to just water for households, and not see the different parts separately, but see it as interconnected and as an ecosystem. The second one is to integrate gray and green, and also know that if we don't allow for water to enter the system, in other words, to have enough water to keep our ecosystems alive, we will eventually choke the supply anyway. So when we, for example, build a dam, instead of just building the dam, also make provision for offsetting the catchment restoration when we design dams. So don't see the two as separately, but to see it as integrated. And then to look at the water value chain of how much does it really mean to bring water from the catchments to the tap. And the cheaper water is, the more water we will use. And if something has the real value, then we will use less water. So by using this, we can raise awareness about the bigger picture. What do we want to achieve? We want to achieve water security. So it's more than just the price. Raise the awareness about the end in mind, and then shape the messaging so that we can get those who would say water is a human right, or water should be for free, to get them to understand the risk of running out or not having water. So in conclusion, when you thought about that exercise, how did we respond? How did we, what would be the argument for the water for increasing the cost of water? And I did this recently, just asked a few people, do you think we pay enough for water? Some people say, maybe not, but I have the money to pay for the water. So even if I have to pay more for the water, it's okay, I have the money. Others say, no, water should be free. It's a human right. So as long as we open the tap and the water comes out, and as long as we have the water, we won't value it we won't attach the right value to it. So we need to change our relationship with water. We have to change the awareness and the messaging to be able to bring people along and to have that long-term water security in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you very much for that. Those are indeed food for thought. How do we value water? Is it only in terms of money, or is it only, and also to look at from a different perspective, from the user perspective? And I think that is a key message that we should actually interrogate as we go down further. In this regard, colleagues, I'd like to bring in our next speaker. Her name is Ms. Refugio Lusufi. Ms. Lusufi is over 20 years of experience when it comes to civil engineering and specializing in geotechnical, investigations and domestic and non-domestic areas. She is currently working with the WRC in testing and commercialization of non-sewage sanitation technologies under our SSTEP and WADA programs. So without further ado, I'll give Ms. D'Souza the next 6 minutes to give us her thoughts. Thank you very much. Refugee, I think you are muted. You might want to unmute. Fantastic.
Sorry about that. Yes, thank you so much for the extra minute that you have allocated, Tiani. And thank you to ICLE and to the WRC for the invitation to form part of this event and to come and serve with my fellow panelists. Louis, I thoroughly enjoyed the exercise that you did. Actually, it got me thinking about the fact that this is something that we actually need to ask more often because we just take it for granted that people are willing to pay for things without actually running proper surveys to confirm it. I must say outright that I do not have any answers, Dr. Musibi. As a businesswoman in the industry, I unfortunately have more questions than answers at this moment. I will be speaking from a South African perspective, and I hope that my experience is not too different from the rest of the continent. Now, depending on one's geographic location in South Africa, access to water can either be seen to be abundant and consistent, or it can be seen to be scarce. How one uses water is influenced mostly by the society that we grow up in, and also it's guided by the perception of whether there is a scarcity or an abundance of water. Now, traditionally, in areas where water does not miraculously appear when a tap is turned on, the management and control of water is primarily the responsibility of women and children. Women are the ones who are made to carry heavy buckets of water on their heads and travel long distances to draw water from often very unsafe water sources in order for them to be able to meet the needs of the human life, which are so dependent on water, as well as for farming activities. Now, how do we get water? Water accumulates naturally in rivers during rainfall events. The source is plentiful in those areas where they do receive rainfall during rainy seasons, but quite scarce in dry seasons. Now, in order to ride out the times of water scarcity, indigenous knowledge and technologies are relied upon by most village people when the rivers and the wells run dry. In urban settings, we have water provided by systems and infrastructure that allows a tap to be opened to discharge water which is of drinking quality. Or rather, it should be safe, as we've learned in most municipalities that that is no longer the case. And this water we can use for consumption, for cooking, for meeting our hygienic needs, and to drive economic facilities and for recreation. In South Africa, the Department of Water and Sanitation is the custodian of our water resources, and they have the responsibility to formulate and implement policies that govern how we use our water. The uses of water, as it's already been said, water is life. Water supports life. Water is not only used as an input to human settlement activities such as household use for irrigation, but it also drives our economic activities. A large portion of South Africa's GDP is directly dependent upon water. For example, 15% of our GDP comes from agriculture, which uses 60% of the country's water supply. And the country's industry sector contributes about 29% to the national GDP, and it uses almost 11% of the nation's water. Now, over and above this, water also supports ecosystem services, such as our natural environment, wildlife support, and river flows to ensure that our aquatic ecosystem are fully supported. Water distribution in South Africa is one of the most unequal distribution in the world. According to UN Water, roughly 60% of South Africans live in urban settings and 40% in rural settings. Currently, South Africa has access to 77% surface water and 9% groundwater, the rest being recycled water. South Africa, as I said, has an unequitable distribution of resources and infrastructure. The population's dependence on water is not evenly distributed. Due to a lack of water infrastructure in rural settlements, 74% of all rural people are entirely dependent upon groundwater in the form of wells and boreholes. Water distribution and allocation, unfortunately, depends on affordability for the populations that they serve, resulting in the majority of South Africans not having consistent access to good quality water. Now, our status quo with regards to the quality of our water is public sector bears the responsibility for the provision of water and sanitation services in the country. The impact of climate changes are well documented and have been felt by most of us in recent years, as the example was mentioned about Cape Town. South Africa is very quickly becoming a scarce resource country due to climate change and increased concentration of human settlement. Our piped water and sanitation infrastructure is aging and has reached capacity and is poorly maintained. According to Blue Water Bio, out of 1,600 wastewater treatment plants in South Africa, at least 60% of them are not meeting regulatory compliance requirements, which means that they then discharge water which is not correctly treated back into our rivers. Economic activities such as mining have also led to extensive pollution with mine runoff that has contaminated our water supplies. And our water aquifers are rapidly being depleted. So if you listen to all these challenges that we have, you would think that it would be easy to build a business model around this in order for us to meet these challenges and find solutions. With these problems, it can't be business as usual. We are forced to look at water differently, how we use it, how we value it, and what can be done to preserve this dwindling resource. South Africa needs to reduce its water demand and increase supply for a growing population and economy to ensure water security by 2030. Now, the current conventional technologies, I think I'm not even going to spend time going into it much. We know that if you live in a city, the water that you drink is drawn from a river and then it's piped to a water treatment plant, when it is treated and then is transported over distances towards cities and then reticulated into our pipe network. After the use of this water, it's collected as grey water and black water and piped back to wastewater treatment plants for treatment, and then it is discharged back into the environment. Because of the link that we have, one cannot think about water without thinking about sanitation. So at Prana, what we did was we had a look at the water cycle to see where in that whole value chain we can play, what role we can play in reducing, reusing, and recycling water. Flushing toilets add a significant demand on our potable water. For example, in a household of 5 people, you are looking at an average of 225 liters per day of clean, drinkable water that is being flushed down the toilet. With support and collaboration with the WRC, we then looked at disruptive, decentralized wastewater treatment systems, which treats gray and black water on site. And the water can then be reused for flushing and for irrigation and for agricultural activities. And the pain points that we were addressing included the provision of waterborne system to underserved areas with no infrastructure network, reducing the need to use clean water for every flush, reducing demand at wastewater treatment plants, and also to provide solutions for sanitation for public facilities such as schools, hospitals, and clinics, as well as remote businesses. We are currently testing these units under local conditions, and we are looking at commercializing the technology and ultimately to produce them locally. By producing them locally, we will be addressing yet another challenge, which is to create jobs and to drive down the cost of the units, fostering the democratization of the technology over time. Now, the question is whether water and sanitation actually makes a sustainable business case. Can one actually build a sustainable business based on a resource which is historically been priced so low? Now, how do we value water? I would imagine that it is easy to put a high price on water if it produces something else that we already value. For example, electricity, if you think of hydropower. Or if you are thinking of buying bottled water, you are willing to pay a higher price as well because of the processing and packaging that comes with it. Now, when it comes to water from a tap and sanitation, I'm afraid the story is not that straightforward. For one, rainwater is free. Therefore, people perceive that water is supposed to be free. It's only when you dig deeper into the element of water quality and sustainable access where people start to actually realize that it really can't be free. Because people do not see the pipe works and infrastructure that provide their access to water, they tend not to value it as high as other products. They therefore would not be willing to spend money on it. However, the fear of water scarcity is now driving the world to look at water as a commodity. It takes a community's water supply being cut off for users to realize that although we can always make a plan when it comes to load shedding and you don't have electricity, you can make plans to meet your power needs, there is no substitute for a lack of water. Now that realization could be the beginning of how we value water. If we look at water as a commodity, its pricing would be based on the basic economic concept of demand and supply. To determine an equilibrium price of water, one would need to plot the demand versus supply curve to see where the two intersect. Now, in the case of water, the demand is quickly surpassing the supply. When demand exceeds supply for a good or a service, prices rise, which means that the majority of South Africans will not be able to afford water. So we can't use that as an approach to valuing water. And we can't look at water in isolation. We also have to look at other factors which are interconnected. For example, the country's economy and also the impact that water has on health. This is especially relevant now with the COVID pandemic being a current issue and washing of hands being one of the major protocols for curbing and maintaining the pandemic. In conclusion, with nearly 2/3 of the world's population predicted to face water shortages by 2025, it is my opinion that more value needs to be placed on water, and serious investment is required to turn this ship around. With the help of technology providers, aggressive R&D, academia, and collaboration between public and private sector, the world does not have to suffer. We can all find solutions so that the world does not have to suffer the consequences of a world facing water shortages. The units that Prana are testing and commercializing have the potential to save water, but it all depends on how the end user values the technology and if they find it worthwhile to actually invest in such technology. And women are disproportionately affected by the water crisis. And research has shown that women have been the most affected by the COVID pandemic. The lack of access to water and sanitation locks women in a cycle of poverty. We have a solution which can contribute meaningfully, not only towards the achievement of SDG 6, but also SDG 5, if we allow women to participate meaningfully in this sector. I will end with a quote which says, "When the last tree is cut down, the last fish has been eaten, and the last stream poisoned, you will realize that you cannot eat money." With this, I probe everyone to say, let's change our mindset and move away from being so profit-driven and look at finding ways to ensure sustainability of the human race and for our planet. Thank you.
Tiani, you're on mute.
Thank you, Refila. Thank you, Refila, for your talk and your presentation. Those were really indeed sobering thoughts to ponder upon. When the last tree and the last fish, you can't eat money. That's definitely true. And thank you for your presentation. Also, looking into some of the elements that you've touched on with regards to the economics of scale, looking at the pricing of water, whether pricing it very low or should be tying it to what we value most in our lives. Those are in terms of the interconnectedness, the nexus thereof. Those are very sobering thoughts that you should think about. But I think I have another speaker here who may provide other solutions from the ones that you've also provided. I'm going to call upon Rory. Rory, I'm going to give you strictly 6 minutes. Basically, you should just run through your presentation. If you can do it in less than that, that'd be wonderful.
Okay.
You know, sometimes it's a bit challenging, you know, managing ladies when they're talking such important aspects in our lives, and you know, we cannot live without water. So, Rory is the founder of Blue Afrique. He's the CEO. He's one of the WC alumni when it comes to innovative development programs. He's actually a recipient of the WIDA and SASTA program. Rory has a number of technologies that have been profiled in different countries and in the continent. So I'll give Rory your time. Please let us take us through it.
Bonjour a tous. Good day, everyone. Thank you for the time granted. And we can't rush the ladies because this is their month. And we have to do as the best that we can to try and make sure that our ladies are ahead in the water sector and everything that they need to share is shared upon. With that said and done, I'm Rory Mpete from Blue Afrique. We are a manufacturer of innovative water and sanitation solutions, mainly with an aim to improve hygiene, save water, and incorporate, most importantly, gray water in everyday living. We are a UN-aligned company in trying to support the UN Sustainable Goals in addressing goal number 6, number 9, and number 11. And today we are here in essence to foster goal number 17. Our products are mostly DIY, particularly ready for retrofit, and most importantly, easily scalable to cater for our African continent at large. We try to manufacture products that are sustainable for our markets, and equally try to use or make use of sustainable recyclable material where possible. And most of the solutions that we take out are manufactured in plastic, and that's what puts us in the forefront as we are changing the technology that you find in any sanitation environment at this stage. We offer 3 types of services in Blue Afrique, where we do research and development, we do manufacturing, and we offer what is commonly found in the market as portable services. This will include portable toilet services and equally portable hand wash solutions. We are here today to talk about the value of water through innovation. How can we add our role in trying to secure this valuable resource? We know that there are 5 principles that have been taught to us worldwide to try to save water in our household through washing machines, sustainable or water efficient toilet units, repairing of visible leaks, taking shorter showers, and equally closing the tap while brushing our teeth. That is what we know. I'm here today to talk about the colors of what we've just seen. We currently wash our clothes with blue water, which is fresh, potable, drinkable water. We currently flush our toilets with blue water. We currently shower with blue water. We currently brush our teeth with blue water. Now, water has 3 different segments. We have blue water, which is what we drink, gray water, reusable, non-drinkable water, and black water, which at this stage, we dispose of. Now, in Blue Afrique, we've seen a niche in the market on how we can penetrate the use of that color, gray. Now, in our innovating sector, we've developed 2 types of solutions, considering and focusing on gray water particularly, to say that we have solutions that are designed for impact or immediate impact, and we have solutions that are designed for sustainable, more impact. What do we mean by impact solutions? We've seen in the recent pandemic outbreak over the past year or so of how COVID demanded that we supply freshwater supply in the remotest of areas to ensure that people wash their hands. Now, in that essence, hand washing became a more sustainable solution as compared to using a sanitizer based on affordability. We designed what we call these are portable hand wash stations that allow the user to use fresh water to wash their hands. But not only that, these are hands-free operated mechanisms that measure the amount of water that each user will use, ranging from 75 mils to 150 mils per foot pump. Now, once we start to provide water to our citizens to save lives, we equally need to be on the lookout on the amount of water that we are giving them to save lives. And this is where our solutions, based on the ability to measure the potability of the water provided, came in very handy. We have units that range from 25 liters of water capacity to 10,000 liter water capacity, catering for communities, shopping centers, shopping complexes, schools, hospitals, and so forth. Now, once we deal with the immediate impact, which we see that hand washing is a need, we need to relook into our lives. How do we adapt to the new norm or consider solutions that can be sustainable going ahead? That's where we developed our sanitation range, where we offer two types of solutions. On the left-hand side, or rather maybe the middle, you'll find our P basin urinal unit. There's a urinal unit that's fitted with a hand wash basin on top, allowing the male user to pee, flush, and wash their hands. Now, the element here is promptly focusing on gray water. How can we reuse fresh water before we dispose of it or before it turns black? And this is where we come in. Currently, the male users are considered to be the #1 non-hygienic people in the bathroom facility because we are given that 3 seconds to think, should I go to the basin or not? With our solution, we've proven that as soon as you flush, you don't have to think twice. Automatically, water comes out on the basin, allowing you to wash your hands. We've equally developed to the right-hand side what we call the V system. The V system is a toilet unit that flushes with 3 to 6 liters of water, comes with a hand wash basin on top, allowing the user to sit down, do their #2, flush, and wash their hands, promoting or changing the concept of using blue water to flush in the toilet. Now, by using this product, we've introduced a gray water flushing toilet within the toilet environment. We're improving on hygiene. Immediately, we are flushing with gray water immediately in the toilet cubicle. And fourthly, we are saving on the plumbing cost or construction cost associated with installing toilets and basins. With the basin being on top, it allows for the basin units on the sides not to be installed. Piping, taps, and fittings are eliminated. Our units are retrofit to fit onto any existing infrastructure or plumbing material. And equally, they prompt hygiene and encourage hand washing in every facility. Now, with these units that we've installed, we've seen the impact of water throughout the pandemic, whereby our units came in handy as immediate impact solutions, and now are proven to be handy in sustainability of those solutions. We've installed our units throughout schools, shopping centers to encourage the users to be hygienic. We've equally installed our sanitation range that are very colorful, I must add, to schools to encourage and to change the mindset of the kids going ahead on improving hygiene. Currently, in a cubicle, the child will be allowed to sit down, do their business, and wash their hands without leaving the cubicle. In this sense, we're promoting hygiene in every possible way that we can, showing that the value of water paired with innovation can yield the much value that we need to preserve this valuable resource of water. We've prepared a short video clip of Afrique to see how we are impacting schools and mass-occupied buildings such as our clinics and society at large. We thank you.
Hello there. My name is Akani, which means building together. I am 9 years old and I love school, especially the environment since I am the water and hygiene ambassador. Ever since my school installed the Luau-free pee basin, I am able to pee, flush and wash my hands. All-in-one flush, saving 1 liter of fresh water per flush. Wow! Ever since my school installed the Luafreak V-cistern, I am able to do my number 2 wash my hands, all in one flush. Because the V-cistern only uses 3 liters of water to flush, I am able to save up to 3 liters of water per flush and wash my hands. Stop wasting water, amp. Join me as we save our water to save our planet.
We thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and we hope to see more of our solutions as we change the usage of water from blue to gray before we get to black. We thank you.
Tiani, you're on mute.
Thank you, Coach. Rory, thank you very much for your presentation. Wonderful innovations, value-adding innovations, absolutely water-valuing innovations. Thank you very much for that. So colleagues, if there are any questions online, please feel free to post them and send them on the question box. And also, if there's a burning issue, if you want to voice it out, please also tell us. In this regard, there's actually a question that has come out on the chat box that is, I think, more direct towards Dewey. Louis, it says here, given the fact that 90% of the human body is made out of water, and with less dry mass, maintaining water volumes makes human and plants more healthier. In Africa, wetlands are drying out, aquifers are drying, meaning that the greatest percentage of Earth's mass, which is water, is drying out, leaving out the dry areas. What, in your opinion, is the best practice that African cities retain or can retain from, or rather, what is the best practice that African cities retains from best practice from other cities in the world? So basically a comparison of best practice that we can learn from other countries in the world and what South African cities can actually retain and implement in preserving water.
Thank you for that question. It's such the answer may sound simple, but it's much more complex because cities are densely populated. Many of the cities are already being designed, but one can start by looking at stormwater runoff. How do we direct stormwater? If there's wetlands that's drying out, direct stormwater to wetlands and restore those wetlands to take the stormwater up and replenish aquifers. So that's again that link between gray and green where wetlands can be restored. The other thing that cities can do for the future is to look at how we design the cities. If you look at the city, we've got these hard surfaces everywhere. So if one can, going forward, look at how the surfaces can be more permeable, that way water can sink in, try not to have lawns because it takes up water, but look at ways of creating surfaces where water can go in. And then look at our urban rivers. Often many of the cities have rivers, and if we can restore the rivers and look at the water quality in the rivers and how they can, to help infiltration, increase and work with the riparian areas, have a little bit of a buffer so that we don't use our rivers as sewers, but rather as living systems upon which cities depend. And then in Africa, in many countries or many cities in South Africa, for example, there's invasive alien plants that grow in cities. And if we remove invasive plants and restore indigenous vegetation, it can help with improving aquifer recharge. And then finally, something that Cape Town did back in 1976 is to have a managed, what we call a managed aquifer, where treated household water goes through a treatment system. It enters aquifer or it replenishes the aquifer, and then the water gets reused. So you have that full cycle. And if you're interested, one can look online for the Atlantis aquifer near Cape Town. That's a prime example of a managed aquifer. Initially, it cost money to do that, but one can offset that in terms of, if one looked, it's this point of what are we willing to invest so that we have long-term sustainable water. And a managed aquifer where you recycle water is really quite something that I think we should think more about. And these are, as I said, it sounds very simple, but it's just a few examples of what cities can do to recharge aquifers, because it's crucial. The problem with groundwater is we can't see it. If we look at, for example, surface water, the Cape Townians will know when we could see how empty the dams become. You can't see underground, and that's why we don't understand our aquifers well enough. We can over abstract, and we don't put the water back that we take out. So I love that question. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Wonderful indeed. City aquifer recharge. Wonderful indeed. Refilo, there's a question for you as well this side. And the question states, what do you think local government could learn from the private sector? You mentioned the need to connect water initiatives with gender equity. And then the question says, can you elaborate more on how that could be done? Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you for that question. Sure, it's a very complex question that needs to be unpacked. Government is quite aware of the challenges that we are facing. And as much as government says and claims that they do want solutions, they are quite slow in putting policies that allow for unconventional solutions basically to be implemented. So as much as private sector actually wants to participate and to assist with regards to the challenges that we are encountering, because of the policies and all the barriers that public sector is encountering when it comes to procurement from government, it becomes very difficult for private sector to participate. What can they learn from it? They can put enough money towards research and development as well, so that they can see what solutions are out there, and if they want to single-handedly by themselves go out and implement them, then they might, but there's always a good collaboration and they can get better solutions really if they collaborate with public sector. Government currently has a problem with capacity, and the skills lie within the public private sector. So there would need to be some form of collaboration between public and private sector.
Thank you, Ms. Lusofi. I see the follow-up questions, but let me give Rory a chance first, and then I'll come back to you and Louis, only to give like a 1-minute short answer. Rory, one of the questions that is targeted to you is that how can we get these types of technologies to be accepted more widely around schools, around cities? How can we promote the acceptance of these new technologies? This is what the question is asking.
Well, thanks for the question, Tiani. What we've picked up with innovation is more or less to what the reviewer just highlighted, is we need government to undertake the solution and the new technologies to form part of the procurement processes. And we are quite glad it was highlighted just about a week ago when the Department of Water and Sanitation introduced, I think it was a TKC platform, where new innovative technologies will be given a database where municipalities and procurement offices will be able to search new alternative technologies and innovative solutions that the municipalities can uptake. So from us and our point of view is that innovation needs to be supported. And remember, we are trying to change the mindset of people to say that instead of buying a normal toilet with a basin unit, rather buy a toilet that comes with a basin unit. Instead of buying a ceramic toilet, rather buy a more sustainable product that you will never have to change since it's made from sustainable material, plastic. So with this database, we foresee that the integration of innovative solutions will be uptaken possibly within the near future quite a lot. And we equally see that with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, technology or innovative solutions with regards to hygiene are more receptive now when we propose to clientele in the property market, basically in your shopping malls, your malls and your office parks and so forth, where it has become a necessity or a need for a building or an entity to have. So that has become, it's like a catch-22. It's like they had, like it was said, it's as if water must finish for us to realize the importance of water. And with innovation, what we are picking up, it's as if there had to be a pandemic of this magnitude for us to realize the importance of hygiene. And it's quite unfortunate, but we are hopeful that such solutions can be uptaken quicker going ahead, so that we are more proactive as a unit.
Thank you, Rory. And I said there's going to be one more question. Hopefully, each colleague can actually answer within a minute or less than a minute. This is basically, we don't want to have a situation where the water runs out first in order to realize its importance. Now, we've deliberated on a number of aspects, including the value of water, around the economics of finance of it, around the water, around the food and energy nexus part of it, around the user face or interface part of it. Now, how should we be communicating the importance of water to the inhabitants of the country, to the global citizenry? How should we be communicating water? So that's my question to you. And this question also ties in part of a question that is asked by Richmond Conan, who's talking around partnerships, private-public partnerships activities, and connecting that to local government and regional governments. So the key question here is, how should we be communicating the value of water? So I'll give you a minute each, colleagues, and then we'll have to move on to the next session. Thank you. In this regard, I will start with the refueler. I'll start with the ladies. Let me be clear. I'll start with the ladies. I'll start with refueler, go to Louis, and then end up with you, Rory. Thank you.
My thoughts on that question is that community education is going to become very key, because people will not change their perception on something if it hasn't been broken. And we can't wait until we get to that stage where we really don't have water in order for people to start changing their behavior or habits around water. So I would say that maybe we need to spend a lot of time educating communities, explaining exactly how, when they turn that tap, where that water comes from, so that they can see the background part of it, and they can start appreciating and wanting to be part of this movement to save and reuse water.
Thank you, Ms. Lesufi. Louis?
Tiane, I would say getting champions within communities, because we need to get people who live in those communities to who has that relationship with water to share the message. Otherwise, people become tone deaf because it comes from either government or the private sector. But having champions in communities to spread the message, that's one idea. And in terms of the public-private partnerships, I will share in the chat a link to to water funds, one way of creating public-private partnerships, and you can find that link in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Rory?
In my view, I would say I support Louis with regards to champions. But in this regard, I would say champions are kids. And we need to drive them in the message to kids because they are our future adults, our future leaders. And if we're to focus the educational messages on the young ones in school, I believe this will drive a new paradigm shift of the entire world of how we view hygiene, how we view water, and how we can save it and secure it going ahead. I thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much, Rory, Dewey, and Refilo for your contributions and your time. I'd like to hand over the session back to the chair of the session today, who is Taryn. And also thank you, colleagues, for spending your time with us. And please, if you have any questions on the matters raised that are raised today, please feel free to send them on the chat box or the question and answer session. Also, you can email them to, we can say we'll leave our emails on the links. You can email us your questions or any views and comments that you may have. Or if you want to share information with us as well, you can still do that through our email box and the chat box. So my email will be sent to you, and I believe so will be the ICLEI's one. So thank you, colleagues, for your time. I hand back to the chair. Terry?
Thanks, Tiani, and thank you so much, colleagues. I think there was such a wealth of information that's just been shared. So we would invite our first panel to stay with us throughout the session, and we may have an opportunity for some additional question and answers depending on the time. So with this, I'd like to move straight on to our second moderated session by Lauren Aranza of ICLEI Africa. And as before, reiterating Tiani's comments, please, if you have any questions, feel free to add them into the chat or the Q&A, and also share your thoughts on what water means to you, and maybe if any of the discussion points so far are making you think a little bit differently and thinking about outside the box. So Lauren, you have the floor.
Thank you, Taryn. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Lauren Arndt from ICLEI Africa. So the first session covered a lot more around the connection to finance and the private sector. In the second session, we will focus a little bit more on the connection between nature and water, the importance of community engagement, and the role of the research community. First up, we have Vanessa Tischer, who's a professional services officer in climate change, energy, and resilience at ICLEI Africa. Vanessa is working on various projects helping African cities become more climate resilient. Vanessa, if you can turn on your camera and share your screen.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you so much to the hosts of this webinar for the great opportunity to speak. As I've already been introduced, my name is Vanessa Tischer, a professional officer at ICLEI Africa, and today I would like to share a little bit about one of our projects at ICLEI called the Urban Natural Assets Project, which is also known as Una Rivers for Life. So we've implemented this project in a couple of African cities, including Lilongwe, Addis Ababa, Kampala and Entebbe, Kisumu, Nakala, and Kilimani in Mozambique. So basically this project tries to link water and biodiversity, and the way that these linkages can be leveraged into building mind shifts at the community and the city level in terms of how others value water, beyond the service delivery. So my presentation today will mostly be about the rivers, which is a project that we have implemented in Lilongwe City in Malawi. So I'd like to share mostly about the lessons learned from this project, the specific activity called the River Revitalization Project, which is mostly about reviving that river and valuing rivers, and not specifically about valuing water, but we know that we get our water from rivers. So hopefully you will get that linkage between our rivers and the water. So the UNA team went into Lilongwe City, and we tried to encourage the city council to select an informal settlement, an informal site, actually not informal settlement, for a river restoration project, which aims to use this opportunity to shift officials' perception and yield learnings about how best they can work with informality to best manage urban natural assets. So we looked at the Tuka and Luzulu market, informal markets in Lilongwe, which produce a fair amount of waste that ends up into the adjacent river, which is the Lilongwe River. And these sites were chosen as the implementation sites. So both of these markets are located on the banks of the Lilongwe River, and they compromise the health of that river. And they also have been identified as a significant point of source of pollution along that river, which includes challenges such as encroachment into the river buffer zone, urban agriculture happening on those river banks, and waste dumping alongside as well as into those rivers. So Lilongwe River being one of the major sources of water in Lilongwe, the health of that river directly affects the people of Lilongwe, and also it affects the people that live downstream of that river. So for today, I would like to chat a little bit about the approach that we have undertaken to implement this activity, trying to revive the Lilongwe River, actually a portion of that river, and also chat about the lessons learned from that approach. So we embarked on an extensive process of relationship and trust building with city officials and informal settlement and traders to develop a phased implementation strategy focusing on awareness raising, capacity building, and we actually conducted capacity building of roughly 500,000 stakeholders with regards to waste management and the importance of protecting urban natural assets such as rivers. And we also trained approximately 16 women on how to compost organic waste that's produced from these markets that are right next to the rivers and would often dump the organic waste into the rivers. So we really just wanted to train the women in those markets on how to compost that organic waste and turn it into some sort of income for themselves. So for these compost activities, we also established a couple of composting areas and a shelter for these women to keep their equipment safely in. And when it is raining or if it's too hot, that shelter kind of protects them from all these issues. And also we conducted a couple of river cleanups along the Lizulu and Lutuku market, and we contacted these river cleanups with a couple of community members as well as the NGO that we work very closely with. So from this approach, I would like to share a couple of lessons learned that came out of it, you know, on how it felt when we tried to implement this type of an activity, trying to revive a river section that is highly polluted, first of all, by informal markets that are also of high importance to the community for the provision of livelihoods and for economic opportunities. So moving on to the key lessons that came out of this project. To date, a variety of them came out of it, and these include capacity building, which is really often required in cities to help change the perception of informality and reduce the discomfort around working in unplanned areas. Also, we've learned that it's important to build relationships, which are a key agent of change. And also it's critical to first and foremost invest your time in building collaborative relationships between city councils and informal communities. And this can be achieved by creating that space for engagement and encouraging regular site visits and in-person interactions between the city council and the community members or the informal traders. We also learned that we need to work with terminology informality. We need to recognize that in certain contexts, it may be helpful to see informal areas as unserviced areas rather than unclaimed areas. And we also thought that the most effective solution to upgrading these informal areas are those that the most effective ways to upgrade these informal areas are those that are co-designed by local communities and municipal officials, as well as the informal traders. So really, this is an important point, because if all these three stakeholders are working together on trying to upgrade the informal areas, this will be, the process will be more effective if everyone is included in this process. And also we learned that well-defined leadership structures often exist within these informal sector areas. And when we went into these markets, we realized that it was much easier to work with the informal traders, because there were these existing leadership structures. They are informal, but there's a leader of this section of the market, a leader of that section of the market, and it was easier to collaborate with those people around the unclaimed areas. Also, we learned that it can be helpful to partner with a civil society organization that focuses on upgrading urban areas using community-driven approaches. Sometimes it's a bit challenging to try and provide assistance to one particular area by yourself. But if you, especially as an organization that's based in South Africa, and you're trying to implement that activity in another country, sometimes it's very helpful to try and connect with other civil society organizations that are already working in those countries and work together to make change in those areas. And last but not least, we also learned that nature-based upgrading work in informal settlements present the opportunity to collect data that backs up and quantifies how nature is for building urban resilience. And such evidence can be used to make the case for nature and motivate for investment in larger nature-based solutions programs in the future. So just to conclude, I would like to say that while some of these outcomes and outputs are important from the collaboration, policy, and integration point of view, the process is just as important, and it's being documented so that cities that want to contribute to building a nexus between water and nature to better value their water can have access to it. So you will have the links to these documents in the chat. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. It's really lovely to see that a project that was linked to nature also brought in themes of gender and community engagement. Next, we will invite Bawala Funga, who is a Senior Community Development Officer, Community Engagement Coordinator from Lusaka City Council. Today, she will be discussing water security in Lusaka through the lens of community engagement and empowerment. Bawala, could you please turn on your video and share your presentation?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I would like to thank ICLEI and for this opportunity to share what we've been doing as Lusaka. So I'll be looking at community engagement and empowerment using a human rights-based approach to water security. And I think I've already been introduced. I'll just talk about our city. We have about Zambia has about 6 million, and Lusaka has about 2.3 million people. And we sit on 375 square meters. Some of the threats within Lusaka when it comes to water security include land degradation, water demand, pollution, and also sometimes we don't have viable rainfall. And this has caused threats on Lusaka, and sometimes we also experience urban flooding. So as Lusaka City Council, we are a local authority, and we are part of the Lusaka Water Security Initiative, and we committed ourselves to provide quality services and an enabling environment for meaningful employment opportunities and advance stakeholder participation within the Water Security Initiative. And some of our key services include housing, roads, drains, as well as sustainable integrated city planning, which is within our mandate, and also to develop public health, ensuring that the quality public health standards are maintained because of the mandate and obligation. And just to mention that we've been part of the Lusaka Water Security Initiative since 2016. This is just our area of focus. We've been working within the peri-urban areas, and just map shows all the wards within the city. We have about 33 wards, and within these wards, we have about 21 peri-urban areas, and that has been our focus because of they are not planned. So they lack the basic services such as water. In order for us to secure this groundwater, we use what we're calling the human rights-based approach. And the reason we use this approach is because it increased participation or control within the communities. And by participation, we were making sure that people could be integrated in the planning process from inception until implementation. And also, it creates a strong leadership. We're working with the mayor, the councillors, in order for us to secure this groundwater. And also, it increases the problem assessment capacities within the communities. It also enhances ability to ask why. People should be able to ask why the authority is not providing certain services. And also, the local authority should be able to ask the people. And the other one is that it empowers organizational structures. And in this case, we're looking at Lusaka City Council and the ward development committees within the communities. The ward development committees are the lowest governance structure within the Zambian constitution. So they are the link between the local authority and the community. And also it provides improvement of resource mobilization, also strengthening links to other organizations and people. It also provides equitable relationships within outside agents, and also increases the control over program management. This is the situation. I think I earlier spoke about groundwater pollution as being one of the threats, and the red dots are the pit latrines, and the blue ones are the shallow wells. This is within the city and the situation within the peri-urban. So you can imagine the level of groundwater pollution. So what did we do in order for us to engage the communities? The first step that we had was preparing the process driver. That's the first phase. In order for us to achieve this, we brought in the mayor and the councillors who were trained in water security using the human rights-based approach and also climate information. Then we also had the technical working group trained. The technical working group was a representation of all the people within the local authority. The local authority has about 7 departments, and the idea was to train these people in water security so that it could be mainstreamed in their day-to-day projects and programs within the local authority. The second phase was creating an enabling environment for participation and decision-making. In order for us to do this, we had elections, we had zonal representatives. In a ward, we have a zone, then we have a ward in the structures, and the zone is usually about 700 households. So we had people representing those zones, and we had elections, and from here we had elections again to select the ward development committee. These zonal representatives were trained in local area planning and also water security. So we gave them a task of reaching 100 people each, and in each zone we had 2 representatives. We also had radio programs at different radio stations for sensitization, and this helped us to reach out to more people than just the people that the zonal representatives were meeting. and sensitizing. And it also created a platform for people to call in and ask the councillors in an event where they had questions about the development within their wards. Phase 3, we had the planning together. In the pictures, you can see that the communities are looking at a professional map, but from there they were able to develop their own maps, and they could also tell the experts where they wanted certain facilities. The next picture we had what we were calling the transact walk, where we went around the community and then the community was able to identify the water threats within the ward. And after this process, we developed what we're calling local area plans. These were integrated plans, and they were reflecting water security. For us, when we were going in the community, we went in with the idea of looking at water as an integrated approach, not as just water. So we looked at infrastructure, we looked at solid waste management, we looked at the existing situation or status of the settlements. And we're able to develop about 5 local area plans, which will feed into the Lusaka the Lusaka Integrated Development Plan, and also the information that we were able to gather and collect during this process also influence the Water Security Action and Investment Plan for the city. Some of the updates or achievements that we had the 5 local area plan produced, and Mas mentioned that out of 33 wards, we reached out to 12 wards, and 5 we were able to produce the local area plan. 7 we were able to reach the consensus building and visioning. During the process, we also had a visioning process where the communities were able to tell us what their vision was for the community. And also we were able to train 480 community facilitators, and we're also able to establish the ward development committees and strengthen them. And by strengthening them, I mean, we train them in water security and also local area planning. And through this process, we've been also able to work with different partners such as GIZ, and some of the lessons that I would like to share is that through this process, Lusaka City Council community profiling in the 12 hours gave us the first understanding of the local concerns. We used to plan for the people, not with the people, and this somehow gave us the real picture of what the different wards or communities were prioritizing, reflecting water security. And also by allowing the people to map their communities, this enabled the local authority to capture the details of the water threats within the city. And we're also able to produce professional GIS maps within the process and capture these water threats and find solutions to these water threats. Also, the communities developed their own strategies on how to track priority issues in the local area planning. And lastly, we're able to strengthen the ward development committees in planning and decision making. So through this process, we've been able to, 1, safeguard the recharge areas within the local authority. We've improved the solid waste management system in some of the wards, not all of them, because now there were certain wards that had proposed that the water, they do the tax bundling through water, and the solid waste collection has improved in that area. And in order for us to make this process sustainable, the local area planning budgets were incorporated in the local authorities' budget so that we could pay for some of the priorities that the communities had captured. This is where my presentation ends, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Bawala. Lusaka is definitely leading the way in an excellent example of effective community engagement. I hope to see a lot more of this in other cities in Africa. Next up, we have Professor Jean-Marie Kelechi Onema, who is the Executive Manager and Head of Secretariat at WaterNet. Prof. Jean-Marie manages the implementation at WaterNet, capacity building activities across 16 SADC countries. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Lorraine, for the opportunity to join your session. But before I can give my brief talk to the audience, I would like to extend my appreciation to ICLE Africa and the Water Research Commission for granting me this opportunity to be part of this webinar, especially with the focus on valuing on water in urban setup. And I hope that at the end of my talk, I'll be able to share with the audience the need to strengthen the knowledge base to face impact of climate change in urban setup through social innovation lenses. The World Economic Forum, in its global risk report that was released last month in Geneva, indicated that the livelihood crisis was one of the top short-term threats to the world. And this was in fact speeding up the social cohesion erosion. And with valuing water being in the center, there is a lot of issue of inclusivity and equalities that need to be taken into account, meaning things are becoming even more difficult when we have to try and navigate the various global divide. And just to finish about the global risk report for this year, we have been advised that economic fragility and social division are set to increase. So with that background, I would like to share with the audience this afternoon or morning, based on where the audience is connected from, some of the effort that we have been putting together as part of a project where we came back to the realization that it's critical in order to address societal challenges to operate at systemic level. But this afternoon, I'll focus on the need to strengthen the knowledge base when we look at the impact of climate change that are affecting water. And my reflection will speak to the study that we conducted on the entire African continent, where we went from a background or context of insufficient skills, widespread institutional fragmentation, but also the lack of effective synergies between policy, research, the private sector, and the civil society, especially in urban setup. And that predicament poses obstacle to effectively transfer relevant knowledge and technology. And what the UNDP has advised in terms of core issues and level of change in terms of knowledge for capacity development, which include research supply and demand linkage mechanisms, knowledge sharing tools and mechanisms, as well as brain gain and retention, need to look at issues in a holistic fashion. When we talk about capacity, it's no longer only about knowledge, but it's also about institutional setup, leadership, but also accountability. That's taken into account, we conducted the study across the continent, and these were done in the context of seeing what are the kind of strategy or innovation approaches that could be put in place. And that led us to identify 5 dimensions or mechanisms in order to strengthen existing knowledge base among water management, water stakeholders across the continent. And these 5 dimensions, or the water-related social challenges that we looked at, were your water security, the food security, the energy security, public health, ecosystem management, as well as the water and energy food nexus. For the conceptualization of the social innovation, we harnessed a sociological and economic interpretation of the concept. So this recognized solution not only about technology, but also soft issues like capacity building, governance, and also business model. The geographical coverage of agenda and action points that were investigated were as follow across the continent. I put them in groups per region. In North Africa, we looked at 4 of them. In East Africa, 13. West Africa, 13. Central Africa, 4. Southern Africa, 22. And continent-wide, we looked at 8 documents. This was done by a group of 8 authors or researchers, and it captured both desk research, interviews, online empirical research that capture both the top-down and bottom-up perspective, because it's important before you talk about strengthening capacity, you need to know what's the status of the existing capacity. And what came out in terms of results is that there's some knowledge gap in water-related societal challenges. So in terms of putting some figures, we realized that out of all the document and plan analyzed, 81%, for instance, were not adequately, or the concept of the WEF, the water energy nexus, was literally absent. And only about 22% of the agenda analyzed were talking about water security comprehensively. We have a number of other figures, but I'm not going to bother you with that. But we question what were some of the causes behind those knowledge gaps. And one of the elements that came quite strongly was a lack of enabling ecosystem at institutional level, meaning that the system in terms of knowledge management of some of the existing knowledge was not adequately managed, to the extent that the moment you had some officers leaving, no follow-up was able to be established. So what are the 4 elements that we felt that need to be considered if we want indeed to strengthen in an holistic fashion? The first one is about technology, and talking about technology, it's about the adoption of smart technology. The second point, it's about capacity in terms of skills And here the issue of education, but also training, experiential learning was important. And then the third element was about governance structures. Governance related issues talk to the issue of policies with aspects like your groundwater that was not adequately addressed in most of the policy that we looked at. But also the interaction processes, because we documented that some solution, some innovation exists, but stakeholders are not having platform to exchange some of these knowledges. And finally, it was about the business model or the business opportunity. Real incentive for local business and innovator were found to be lacking but crucial for making sure that some of the need identified are actually met. So I think with that, we came up to the realization that if we need to address the issue of adverse impact that are brought to the water and climate sector due to climate change, a systemic approach is vital. And since we're talking about the value of water this afternoon, I think the entry point of social innovation, if adequately implemented, would help us move forward in that direction. Thank you very much again for affording me this opportunity to be part of the discussion, and I look forward to further discussing with the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. You covered some really important points about capacity development, education, training, knowledge systems, and sharing of that information. I'd like to invite the session 2 speakers to turn on their cameras as we just touch on 3 quick questions for each one of you before we wrap up our webinar today. Starting with Vanessa. So through your presentation, you discussed a lot of what rivers and the wealth of services that they offer. What are some of the issues that you've foreseen in your project that have prevented decision makers from kind of recognizing these critical services?
Thank you so much, Lauren. So I'd say that we often hear that a primary limitation to the ability of ecosystem service valuation to influence decisions usually arises from that complexity of trying to translate science into policy. So basically what I'm trying to say is that although science provides us with a really important foundation for valuing water or valuing rivers, translating those values into policy and management sort of articulates more on collaboration, communication, and partnerships. So these were the collaboration, the communication, and the partnership were some of the challenges that we came across when we were trying to implement this project. So I'd say that there needs to be more focus on some sort of a collaborative framework that will ultimately attempt to communicate river values or valuing water, for example, to influential audiences and build partnerships to translate that value into action. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Vanessa. The next question is for Walia. So I really love the way that you shared your plan to work with people and not to work for people or on behalf of them. So we'd like to know, as lessons for other cities, what do you think are the most important considerations for effectively doing such an inclusive process?
I think for us, the main lessons was to first make people understand what water security was. And this was done through meetings, and also we had trainings with them with the help of the University of Zambia. And also to make them realize that the important role they play within their own development. And for us, I think it's the first time we really gave the power to the people in line with the decentralization policy that was launched by government, because usually, like you've said, we would plan for them. But what is really key is to have both political buy-in
I think we've lost her. When she rejoins, she can finish her thought. In the meantime, maybe we can move on to Prof. Jean-Marie. So we really appreciate your points on understanding capabilities that exist in cities. And you mentioned that knowledge is often lost when champions move on from cities. Could you elaborate more on how we improve the retention of institutional knowledge for water management?
Thank you, Lorraine. You see the concept or the model that has been used in terms of knowledge transfer or skill transfers has been to train individuals. We hope that individuals who are trained are then back into urban setup or urban institution, and they change the way things are being conducted. But unfortunately, some of the institutions in urban setup or in water-related sectors, they don't have incentive to keep those who have been trained. So the moment they've been trained and they go back into systems where they are not being acknowledged, they're not being supported, they tend to move to the next and most appealing institution, creating a lack or a loss in terms of knowledge transfer that would have occurred earlier on. So one of the ways to kind of curb such a negative impact is to, first of all, make sure that knowledge is institutionalized, meaning that it's not about the only few people, but it's broadened. The knowledge, it's broadened. Your knowledge, it's broadened to institution, not vested within a few individuals. So to have critical mass of knowledgeable people who can continue, but also to have institutional rules that encourage effectiveness and efficiency, so that those who are being trained, those who are being efficient, are actually being appreciated. And with that, at the end of the day, the critical mass will be built, but it will still be critical to make sure that knowledge, for instance, are created in terms of repository, which is no longer in the head of somebody, but into a system that could be accessed by more than one person within those water-related institutions. That's one of the typical example that we found was lacking in most of the region that we look at. So that's one of the way to kind of manage that brain drain, if I may call it.
Thank you very much, Prof. I'd like to thank the session 2 speakers for this very interesting, thought-provoking conversation. And then I'd like to hand over to Taryn to take us forward. Taryn, your sound is not coming through. Still not. In that case, Dr. Mandla, if you could take the floor and provide some closing comments.
Hello?
Sorry, yes. Hello, yes. I'm trying to unmute. Colleagues, I'm just gonna make some few comments on what we have shared today. But before I do that, I just want to acknowledge a few people. I want to acknowledge Ms. Kobe Brand, the Regional Director of ICLEI. And I also want to acknowledge the speakers that are represented by TNC, Prana Consulting, Lu Afrique, and the Lusaka City Council, WaterNet. And I also want to acknowledge Jean-Marie, the Executive Manager of WaterNet. There's some very important things that came out of the discussion, and I want to emphasize just 2 or 3 points. Let me just emphasize the 3 points. The issue around communication. We need to do more on communicating the value of water, and all the studies and everything that is being done around demonstrating the value of water to our communities and to our people. And there are various interventions that were referred to, such as education, research, but more importantly, the partnerships. I just want to emphasize the issue around partnerships, that we must continue investing on building these partnerships. I also, in talking about partnerships, the public-private partnerships, as referred to in our discussions today, need also to be strengthened. I find them to be very valuable in terms of what we've been talking about, the value of water. The last point is around innovation. If for water, we can demonstrate and use the best of technologies, and in using the best of technologies, those will lead to us establishing the best industries that will help us in the delivery of water and also in the management of water. That in its own will demonstrate how valuable water is, how important water is. We associate, if I can use the word, good things with the tech that is around it. I mean, I can use a lot of examples. And the same thing needs to happen around water. Where we see the innovations developing, they need to be encouraged, if not for better water management, but simply to brand water as a valuable commodity. With that said, colleagues, I just want to appreciate all the good discussions that were taking place. My apologies that I had to be called in and out, some emergencies I had to attend to, but I try to keep an ear and listen to the discussions, very interesting discussions. And with that said, colleagues, thank you very much for this engagement. And I'm not sure whether there's somebody else who's doing closing remarks, but on my side, much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Msibi, and to the Water Research Commission for all of their partnership and their engagement in putting this webinar together. I'd like to hand over to Ms. Kobe Brandt, the Regional Director for ICLEI Africa, to share some closing reflections and officially close the session. So thank you to our host, and Kobe, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Taryn. And I would like to say, Dr. Msibi, I really like the 3 points that you emphasized. They're very similar to the ones that really struck me. And indeed, I think it struck home today for many people who have tuned in. So I would like to not repeat all of that, but also pay tribute to everybody that contributed. Also in the very active chat box with fantastic links to wonderful resources. So please let us look at that chat box, and you have a few more minutes to look at the chat box, look at the links, follow them. This is the start, and it's not the end. It's not the last conversation we're going to have this year as part of our Changing Cities Dialogue series around water. Today we focus on the value of water, and it's in celebration and you know, doing our little contribution to the globally World Water Day, which globally bound us around this theme, the global theme for the year. But it's a very, very important year and decade that we are entering in now. Not only, as I mentioned in the beginning, is it the UN decade on water with capacity building and a lot of the things that we spoke of today, but it's also the start of the UN decade on ecosystem restoration. And we heard a little bit about the links between ecosystems, nature, people, health, COVID recovery. We heard about the importance of all of that, and that water really is that common thread. Without proper sanitation, access to clean water, we cannot achieve public health. We cannot really come back greener and stronger and more resilient from COVID-19, and we need to seize the opportunity in this tragedy and in this heartbreaking situation of COVID-19 that is still gripping the world in unprecedented ways, certainly for us in our lifetimes. We have to now really look at water in a new way and be serious about those basic rights. We can no longer afford to have millions, billions of people in want of simple things like access to water, access to dignity when it comes to sanitation. And we've heard about, Louise spoke about, we must view the ecosystem of water. We must view things in a systemic way. And that also came out from Jean-Marie very strongly, from WaterNet and from others. We saw wonderful examples from Lusaka. We saw from a very entrepreneurial, spirited individuals showing us what innovation can come for Africa when we look at wastewater, grey water systems and toilets. It doesn't have to be rocket science to actually find, or very high cost solutions, to actually find practical things that we can do in our cities right now to improve people's lives and to actually stop the atrocious situation where some people who are sick and in need do not have access to clean drinking water or to water altogether, for instance, in hospitals. And that has happened. That is happening on our continent, and it does not have to. And we need to also not just look at ecosystem services and say, okay, you know, everything that is ecosystem services can address climate change for instance, and everything related to planting trees, etc., is necessarily the perfect solution. We need to really look at, when it comes to greening and the green recovery of COVID, look at ecosystem solutions very carefully so that we do no harm also to nature and to biodiversity. We often say in ICLEI, yes, planting trees, reforesting our world, that is fantastic and it is needed. But there's a lot more than just planting a tree. It needs to be the right tree in the right place, in the right amount. And then it's about communities. It's about that community that must come in behind it and actually, you know, the long-term care of that tree, nurturing that tree so that it actually becomes a fully fledged individual tree that can give us those services. It all links to a more integrated approach. I'm glad that also, Jean-Marie, you lifted out the issue of the water, food, energy nexus. We need those nexus approaches, and water is always key when it comes to systemic and ecosystem-based approaches. And I'm very, very pleased that people spoke about about the need, many of us spoke about the need for partnerships. And with partnerships, I want to quote Andrew Borain, a very, very well-known and leading practitioner here in South Africa, but internationally renowned for his work in urban transitions. He speaks about active partnering, because partnerships, MOUs, that's fantastic. But for us to truly get together from different backgrounds and from different disciplines, to really get out of our comfort zones and to really form a partnership that can deliver for the people and the communities of our cities, our growing cities in Africa. We need active partnering. So I would like to say that's something that I took from today as well. But what I'd also like to say is that this is not the end of the conversation, as I said, and it cannot afford to stop just at the conversation. We will carry on. And hopefully through the wonderful contacts that we see here in our chat box and everybody that signed up today, we will start building together with everybody who wants to come on board through Changing Cities and through Rise Africa, a community of practice dedicated to water and sanitation issues at the local level, at the city level in Africa. And we will continue this conversation. We'll go deeper, we'll delve deeper. We've heard from Lusaka, we've heard stories from many other initiatives, projects like Una Rivers, Cape Town, wonderful examples, but we need more. We need to hear from every single city. Every single city should have an opportunity to have a voice on this platform. So we invite you, come along on the journey with us and let us actually turn these words into action on the ground as well. And we can start. We've seen what's already happening. We see the good practices out there from Africa, for a new Africa, for a new African city where everybody has access to water and sanitation. And we truly value that water that brings life and sustains our economies. So I'd like to thank every single person who've joined us today. And also I would like to say a special thank you to our wonderful team here at ICLEI Africa, who's driving our water and sanitation agenda, who's participating in global initiatives like Afri Alliance, Una Rivers, Cities with Nature, so many other initiatives. And yes, our doors wide open for active partnering. And thank you very, very much to the Water Resource Commission who joined us today, Dr. Msibi and your colleagues. It's wonderful to partner with you as always, but thank you so much to everybody who's contributed and availed yourselves to share some of your insights as we start this journey of discussing how we can change things around city by city, but not in a linear way, because we need all of our cities to act right now, today, this year, the decade of action for SDGs. SDG 6 can move forward and leaps and bounds in Africa. Maybe Africa can lead the way on SDG 6. I'm sure we can if we start at cities. So I'm hopeful, I'm inspired after today, and I just want to say thank you for joining us. And we look forward to welcoming you. If you follow our links here, I think somewhere in the chat box you can see when our next webinar is going to be, or maybe Taryn, you are going to announce that. But we have a series of cities, Changing Cities webinars coming up. And there are a number of other discussion points we can look forward to as well. So Taryn, thank you. Over to you for closing us out. And it's been a real pleasure being with everybody here today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kobe. And yes, you'll see in the chat, we've put the links for the next Changing Cities webinar. And also more information if you're interested in joining us on the Rise Africa journey. We're open for session submissions. I think the closing date is the 6th of April. So we'd really encourage you to join this movement, join this dialogue, and collaborate with us moving forward. There's links to Cities with Nature and ICLEI Africa in the chat. So yeah, please, we'll leave it open for a few more minutes so that you can copy any links and feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.